Okay, let's get to some of the Tennessee news and politics right now. Brandon Lewis is joining us. He is the founder of the Tennessee Conservative, which you can read at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Brandon, how are you, good sir?
Outstanding. Glad to be here.
So, first off, you got kind of caught in the snow, I saw. How's it looking up there now?
Well, the sun has come out. There's a dusting still left. Like out in the woods, it's pretty good. But where the girls have romped and ripped and made huge snowballs, it's looking a little scarce. But it was neat. Even last night, we had some flurries that, made a dusting on top of what was here. But I imagine most of this will be gone tomorrow.
Okay. So let's go over some of the latest news here. We got a story you have. Tennessee bill is allowing retired law enforcement and veterans to serve as school resource officers, but it failed in subcommittee, which, they keep trying this and it keeps failing. Why is that?
Well, we have an abundance of taxpayer-funded lobbyists in Tennessee that essentially take taxpayer money and then go up to the Capitol and work against the interests of the taxpayers for the government employment agency that they work for. In this case, it's the Tennessee Department of Safety, the Highway Patrol, and even Homeland Security. Essentially what they're afraid of is there's open grant eligibility, and it is presently only being made available to active and employed police officers versus retired ones, and also veterans that have training. And so it would be great for the schools, it would be great for the kids, but as usual, great for the kids, great for the schools, always comes in a distant third, maybe even fourth, to getting your hands on money from taxpayers. And so they are worried that if this starts happening, that money will not flow to their officers and will not end up in their organizations. And so it's closer than it's ever been on the vote. But it's something that failed. It would have been good. We've got so many folks that retire from both armed services and the police force at relatively young ages, and they often end up going to security firms to work. And the grant even stipulates presently that they can hire outside security firms if they like. And so it's a wonder, but it's no small wonder. It's all about the money.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was reading the article, hearing some of these excuses of why they didn't want to pass it, and that's what it seemed like, excuses. It didn't really seem like that was the reason. They're worried about the standards, I guess, which I'm like, you can have standards even if you're hiring retired law enforcement. It just seemed like, and you pointed out why, I guess, but it just seemed like they were coming up with reasons that didn't really make sense at the end of the day.
Well, you can't just go up to a committee and say, we want the money for 20 minutes, right? You've got to dance around and do all the political speak and talk about, the goals as if that's the reason you're there. And so it's not uncommon. Government agencies are consistently, lobbying against, the taxpayers that they represent. So it is par for the course up in Nashville and in Washington.
Well, that's the truth, as we're finding out with Doge and everything else. Speaking with Brandon Lewis of the Tennessee Conservative. So we have another bill that's being put forward. Tennessee lawmakers are filing a bill recognizing only two sexes. This is actually pretty similar to a bill that just passed in our neighboring state, Alabama. They called it the What is a Woman Act there. Very similar, but talk about this a bit.
Well, it's making news, and the next bill they're going to pass is The Sky's Blue, because people don't know it. It just goes to show you how far afield our government, and this is primarily for government, and large corporations and education, right? That is the place where all this is happening. It's not like if you stopped people on the street and you asked them how many sexes are there, that you're going to get more than the answer to from probably 98% of the population. But because our educational institutions and the government and corporations have become so woke, they had to define it. And it just essentially says that, The policy is the state is that there are only two sexes, a biological male and a biological female. And again, it is in close concert to the executive order, which says these sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. And the sex from now on refers to an individual's immutable biological classification. So hopefully this ends. We recently had it called to our attention that I think it's TSAA, which is the athletics governing organization for so many folks that want to participate in sports. That when kids have to fill out this form from a homeschool community, it asks them which sex they want to identify with and then lists out 47 options.
Oh, Lord.
And so it's all this kind of garbage that has creeped into education and even medicine. I mean, it's crazy. Institutions that used to be grounded in science and in facts and in evidence have been corrupted by what Mr. Musk calls the woke mind virus. And it is very contagious, and it is alive and well. So hopefully this will put a damper on it.
Yeah, because when you bring something like this up, you'll hear Democrats and others say, well, do we even need this? What is this about? Why do we care about this? But it really is because it does end up affecting, at the end of the day, certain government programs and public education and everything else. That's why this is needed, right?
Well, it's needed for that reason, which I think is the most direct reason. But I think, we've gotten to a point to where if you can convince people that right is right and left is wrong, or wrong is wrong, or right is wrong and
yeah,
right, whatever, wrong is right. If you can convince people of things that they know themselves, fundamentally, they know it's not true. If you can convince people to participate, even go along, even fail to say anything though they disagree, after a while you wear down the populace so that when the government comes in at some future point and says the economy is great, even though you're destitute, like you can condition people long enough to believe it. I mean, go to communist China. And so I think that, freedom of speech and freedom of thought is something else that this addresses, and that is, we understand this to be true, and we're not going to be conditioned repeatedly through the propaganda to ignore what our eyes, ears, and experience have taught us.
Well, and on that note, this next story is pretty similar to that. We have Tennessee schools have been given 2 weeks to eliminate some of their DEI programs or risk funding loss. Talk about that.
Well, the U.S. Department of Education, it sent out what's called a Dear Colleague letter, and it's very similar to the letter that Obama sent up that said, boys are now able to go into girls' bathrooms, what could go wrong? And, what could go wrong is what went wrong all across the nation, which were sexual assaults, rapes, all kinds of incidences that occurred. But the Dear Colleague letter sent on February 14th warns educational institutions that receive federal funding to cease all race-based decision-making in admissions, hiring, promotion, compensation, financial aid, scholarships, prizes, housing, graduations, ceremonies, and any other aspect of academic and campus life. So, I think about my own university, and this is, back in 1999 through 1998 through 2002, we had a multicultural office, which is basically like if you're not white. There was a whole organization around it. It was segregation, that they just put a different title on. And this stuff is alive and well in the UT system. I mean, it is live and well, and their executives, up until recently, you could not find a UT or really even a community college executive that wasn't completely bought in on all this garbage. And so we may, for a moment, be able to take away the funding because the money is always the best motivator for man and beast, apparently. But it would not surprise me that should we see a shift in administration in 4 years or 8 years, that we'll watch this stuff start bubbling back up to the surface. And the last thing I will say, Yaffee, is much like all of the illegal immigration reforms, there's not a whole lot, but there are a few being pushed by leadership now. All this stuff could have been done in the state of Tennessee without any federal oversight. And it could have all been controlled at the state level. So it's a shame that we don't have enough courage to lead the way, but instead we have to wait until the federal government shows us the way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we did have the Attorney General kind of fighting back against some of this stuff. But that's really been about it. We probably do need more state oversight on some of these things. It's interesting, though. Are you worried about malicious compliance? The idea that they're going to, just kind of change the name of the program but not really get rid of it? I'm sure that's a concern.
Oh yes, that's the constant shell game. As soon as the electorate realizes something is something, you call it something else, wrap it up in a different package that's got a thin veneer on it, and then run with it until the public again becomes aware, calls you out on it. So it's the constant shell game. It reminds me, it's exactly what they did in Animal Farm, right? That just redefining everything and getting people to shake their heads until they agree that people with two legs have four, or dogs or cats, or not all animals are created equal. It's that constant critical theory of knocking down everything that is good and right, so that you can build upon it whatever you want, which is typically a mass grave and a few people at the top. Is typically where it ends. And so we'll see how it goes, man. But I'm excited to see this movement, though. I just hope that it can be maintained. And it's already amazing to watch what's happened at the Trump administration with Doge and all these executive orders, because it's not about the orders and it's not about what is stated. It's about the enforcement and the implementation. And so they seem to be very focused on enforcement and implementation. And I hope that our state level reforms will also have that kind of, teeth to the legislation that comes out of it.
Brandon Lewis is the founder of the Tennessee Conservative. You can read all the great stories there at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. I saw as well that you have been interviewing several state lawmakers and posting the interviews on the website. So, anything interesting there? Who's the latest person you've talked to?
Well, the latest person we've done, we had one with Janice Bowling about nullification, which is something Tennessee desperately needs, essentially saying that, hey, if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, if the federal government tries to hand it down, we don't have to have any part in it in Tennessee, which is how it was originally meant to be. But those federal dollars are so alluring. A lot of lawmakers don't like the idea of losing a buck. If it comes down to a penny or a principle, they'll pick the penny every time. And so there's that. Well, Monty Fritz, has I think it's a month of prayer and fasting, that process started last year. I think we're going to see that come again. There may be some codification behind that. And a bunch of other folks. So if you go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com, go there. And, something that I haven't done, but I think I will, is do an interview with Gail Green, who's running for HC GOP chair. And so, again, for those of you who are out there that are Republicans that want a way to plug in locally, come join me at the reorganization, and you can go to ActivateHamilton.com. That's ActivateHamilton.com. I'd love to see all y'all out there. Yaffee, you don't live in the county, but you would, if you wanted to see some political theater, this would be good to come to.
Okay, interesting. I might just do that. Brandon Lewis, appreciate it, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, take care, sir.